And this was the tough one. I'm not going to lie. My number one, I've had that person locked in for a while, but number 2 and 3 felt difficult for me. But ultimately, I landed on number 3 being, and this might shock some people because I know some people even 6 months ago had this guy as the number 1. But for me, it's Jaxon Smith-Njigba from Ohio State, 6'1", 200 pounds. When he was behind Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, there was so much hype behind him because it was like, man, you watch Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave and you all of a sudden you're seeing what they're doing on Sundays, and then you look back at that old game film and there was games where Jaxon Smith-Njigba was outperforming them by far. So it seemed like, man, this guy's going to come out and just go crazy. And then he had some injuries. He gets limited this past year, and he doesn't fully build up that momentum. I mean, like I said, that sophomore year when they had Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, the guy had 95 catches for 1,600 yards. Like, that's crazy impressive in an offense with those two. But then all of a sudden last year, like I said, the injuries happened. He played just 60 snaps, and that's tough. I still think that he's super talented. I think that he's a really safe pick at receiver, which is why I put him at number 3. I was tempted to put him at number 2. I dropped him down simply because I think that the guys I have above him, I think are a little bit more explosive of playmakers, and I think could be have higher ceilings. But I do think that Jaxon Smith-Njigba has a really safe floor. He's got really good ball skills. I got some stats pulled up here. In 2021, that year where he went crazy, he had 10 contested catches, and he caught 9 of them. So, I mean, when it came to contested catches, his hands were great. His ball skills were solid. After the catch that year, he also broke 19 tackles. That's really good. He's a pretty solid route runner. I think that he works best in the slot, but once again, the tough part is that was because we saw him in an offense with Wilson and Olave. If maybe last year we saw him in an offense without those two, maybe he could have had time to develop as an outside weapon and became more versatile, more well-rounded. It just didn't unfortunately happen. But regardless, Jaxon Smith-Njigba, he is my number 3 receiver. Like I said, I think probably the most well-rounded prospect of the class. Very safe floor, and I think he's just going to be a very good receiver.
All right. Well, for my number 3, once again, we're going to defer, and I feel like my number 3 is definitely in your top 2, and it would be Mr. Quentin Johnston out of TCU. He's my 3rd receiver for the 2023 draft. Positives, great size and pretty good speed. You kind of have to go off film for that. He didn't test. He didn't run out the combine or his. I don't think TCU. Or I don't see any pro days, so I'm guessing he didn't run out their pro day. Great catch radius, jump ball ability. Basically, what you're kind of hearing is kind of like a Drake London, T. Higgins ish. That's why I kind of comped him as not like a Mike Evans level of amazing size and speed. Those guys are kind of rare. So obviously Quentin Johnston will have a role on the outside for pretty much any team in the NFL, and they're going to covet him, and especially in red zone or even third down situations, critical situations, those 50-50 balls, air quotes around 50-50 with him, he can make them more 60-40, 70-30. He can be a huge threat that way, and that's why I have him pretty high up. Some concerns though, not amazing agility. He's one of those guys I mentioned where once he gets the ball in his hands, if he doesn't make you miss with speed, he's definitely one that I'm not sure if he can be shaking many people out of their boots in the NFL, or just breaking tackles is pure physicality, just running through them. But like I said, with his size, size is a skill. You can't teach size in the NFL, and he's one of those people too that uses his size to his advantage. Because some people, they have all the measurables, and we've seen it. We've seen in drafts past where they don't end up doing very well. A la Kevin White, a guy you want to talk about measurables. I'm sorry to dog you, Kevin, but he was one that everyone loved his speed, loved his size, this and that, and it didn't translate. But Quentin Johnston is definitely one that uses all 6'3" of himself to his full advantage, and that's not including his wingspan. But like I said, not amazing agility in route running and with the ball in his hands. And because of that too, I think he's going to be limited on the outside. So it's just it's a lot riding on how dominant of a receiver he can be on the outside, and we've seen many that can do that. So, yeah, he is one of my safer kind of picks. It'd be very interesting where he goes, but yes, he is my number 3, Quentin Johnston out of TCU. I'm guessing you have him in your top 2. I don't know if you have any comments or if you want to move to your number 2. Oh wait, I'm sorry, we're doing snake draft, so I have to move to number 2 now.
Yeah, straight to
my number 2, and that is the man you had at number 3, Jaxon Smith-Njigba. I had him at 2. Mentioned great agility, acceleration, and suddenness, with the ball in his hands or in route running. Is one of the reasons why I had him over Quentin Johnston. Is very like we see the modern Devos and Tyreek Hills. When he gets the ball in his hands, he's very good at shaking people, and honestly, at certain points, even breaking some arm tackles. He's kind of got a thicker lower body. So and then mentioned he played in the slot, so he has experience there. I think he can have. Pretty sure you have success outside at the next level. I think he has good enough straight line speed. He's not going to beat some of the faster corners, but he can set them up with his route running and his short to intermediate skills there. I think he's really good at finding holes in zones, whether it's sitting in zones for the play or even if the play breaks down, which would happen at times. It's going to happen at the next level. He's very good at being a quarterback's friend and basically just really good at the scramble drill, just getting open while his quarterback's running left or right and finding a lane for him to throw to. My comps for him were like Michael Thomas, Devontae Adams. I know that's like high praise. I'm not saying he will be those elite, but he has a lot of the similar traits, I feel. Although I do feel like I said, I think he's more like Devontae, where it's like he doesn't seem very fast, but he's shifty, and as we know with Devontae, he's one of the shiftiest guys. So those are my comps for him. And then concerns. You mentioned the injury. That's always a concern. We mentioned Will Fuller, and I wrote Will Fuller down because he had some kind of a lingering hamstring issue. So hopefully at the next level, we would assume that he'll have to consult that Reddit chart with all the top medical teams maybe to try to see where he wants to go, because hopefully if that isn't an issue at the next level, they can get his body right there so that he can be on the field. And then, like I said, I am a little bit concerned because, like I said, about that speed, because maybe we've seen it before where his straight line speed is top end speed may not translate to the next level, and he's more stuck to the short to intermediate stuff. But nonetheless, I think he can definitely be a playmaker, even if he's not blowing by people. He's going to find a role in the short to intermediate game, a la Michael Thomas and Devontae Adams. So I have Jaxon Smith-Njigba at number 2. He had him at 3. Who is your numero 2, John?
All right, I'm going to assume that this is your number 1, and I will be kind of shocked if he's not. But my number 2 is Zay Flowers out of Boston College. 5'9", weighs 182, so the size isn't necessarily anything crazy. Doesn't really blow you out of the water. You hear that, and you're like, this guy's your number 2. But work with me here. Ran a 4.4 240, so he's got speed. He had a 36-inch vertical, which isn't anything crazy, but for someone of his size, that's pretty solid. He had a 127-inch broad jump, which puts him in the 85th percentile, which once again, for someone at 5'9" to have that kind of a broad jump, that's pretty solid. So he's an explosive athlete. His 10-yard split was a 1.53, which is 74th percentile. So once again, solid. In terms of the athleticism, doesn't really blow you out of the water. That said, where this guy does shine is he is an incredibly dangerous pass catcher, especially deep down the field. Like he seems like one of those receivers that all of a sudden you need to play deep. He's the guy that can make it, especially when there. Also, sorry, not especially. Also, there's going to be a lot of plays that I think he can excel on where the offense just simply needs to get him the ball and let him work. His yards after the catch ability is probably next to none in this class, in my opinion. His ability to separate, his agility, his short area quickness, the moves that he has in his arsenal. He's very versatile and all that kind of stuff. So when you get him the ball in his hands, he's going to make plays happen. But in general, he is a really good separator. Like I said, strong when it comes to the deep ball stuff. But I don't think he's limited to that. I think that he also has a solid enough route tree. He's faced press enough times that he can make some things happen. He's not like the most pure of route runners, but he's pretty darn close. I mean, he's really solid. So once again, I don't know if his skill set, in large part because of his size, is going to have him become the first receiver taken off the board. I mean, we saw that last year with Drake London. There's some types of receivers that teams kind of value as the first receiver off the board, but you get this guy and an offense that just has a solid enough quarterback and an offensive coordinator that's at least creative, and we could see Zay Flowers make a lot of plays and do a lot of damage. The one sort of comp that I really noticed when it came to like his ball skills, his hands, his agility, his yards after the catch, all that kind of stuff, it felt like a little faster Antonio Brown, which I know might seem crazy to say, that's because that's kind of high praise. But I mean, he just had a lot of things that really impressed me, specifically Zay Flowers. So he is my number 2. And that leads me to my number 1, which is, we'll save it for after in case he isn't your number 1. I don't want to spoil it. I was going to ask if he's not your number 1, if you want to comment on it. But
if you want, we can make it seamless just while we stay on topic, and then you can go to 1. It's up to you.
Yeah. Go
so
for your
my number 1 is Zay Flowers. I wrote down Antonio Brown / Steve Smith, and what you said does fit that. Just fluid route runner. And then not only that, like you already said, just even with the ball in his hands, kind of has that 6th gear that he can hit too, where he feels like he's even faster with the ball in his hands and even quicker. And fearless runner, fearless over the middle. Most he's like he was definitely the most. I know some people said drops were a concern, but when I looked at the few drops, it just seems like he was just doing the old. It's not like he had bad hands. It's just that he wanted to get upfield, turn upfield, move his head, and then just forgot the ball. I think that's teachable in the NFL. Just get the ball first, dude. You're fast, you're quick. You can figure that out once you get it. But yeah, I mean, especially in today's NFL, that's why I had him at number 1. It just feels like you have to have one of these kind of slot guys, and like I commented to Antonio Brown, Steve Smith. Those guys could have success in or outside because of not only their amazing route running and agility, but Zay Flowers does have a really good top end speed as well, to at least blow by people and scare some people. So he's my number 1. The size isn't as a concern with me. He mentioned he did have success against press in college, and I think he'll find success in the NFL. And like we mentioned, like with Jalen Hyatt, like hopefully he should go to a team. More teams are utilizing motion and such to get these guys free releases, where I expect that a team will probably find ways to get him the ball or get him free releases that way. So he's kind of a do-it-all. I don't perceive where he won't find a role, because he can, like I said, short, intermediate, deep, he can do it all. So that's why he's my number 1. But I'll throw it to you. Who is your number 1 wide receiver?
Well, before I do that, just one last thing on Flowers, because I do want to add. I really like the comp of Steve Smith as well, because I think that Steve Smith, when you bring that name out, people kind of understand, okay, he plays bigger than his size, because like that was what made Steve Smith, was he was a smaller receiver, 5'9", 5'10", whatever his height was, but he wasn't 6 foot, and everyone knew that Steve Smith, not in terms of just his personality, I mean that was there too, but in terms of his play style, played a lot bigger than his size. And I think that really is Zay Flowers as well. I mean, just look at his blocking. Like if you want to see how he's not just some 5'9" tiny receiver that's quick, go watch tape on his blocking, and then when he gets the ball in his hands, like he will be violent. He is not afraid of getting up and putting effort in some of those regards. So absolutely, yeah, I think that was a strong comparison. And also of note too, because I know some people, when you hear 5'9", you're like, oh, he must be a slot receiver. A majority of his snaps in college were on the outside. So just wanted to throw those two things in there. But finally, for my number 1, it is your number 3, and that is Quentin Johnston out of TCU. 6'4", 215. The 40 time that he ran officially at his pro day recently was a 4.49, but some people said that they clocked him at a 4.46. So sub 4.5. I think that I kind of disagree a little bit with your analysis of him after the catch. I don't think that he's like crazy agile. Like, he's not going to be Zay Flowers by any means, but he has a really solid spin move. Like, it's kind of become his patented move after the catch. So he can beat people with that. And I think that he's a little more fluid than, say, I'm trying to think of the names you brought up. You said T. Higgins and not Mike Evans. There was somebody else.
I said Drake London.
Drake London. I personally think he's a little more fluid of an athlete compared to those two. Like, in terms of his ability to move at that size, personally, I comped him to Julio Jones, which I know might be kind of a crazy comp, but I think that the size, the speed, I think that spin move, I think that overall he's got the ability to move from the stuff that I saw. I do think that the offense he played in did not favor him whatsoever. I mean, there was games where it seemed like he was not a piece of the offense at all. It seemed like there was a lot of times where they used him as a decoy because of how deadly a weapon he was. And that kind of pained me to see sometimes. I also don't think that Duggan was the most special of quarterbacks. Also, I mean, this could just be compared to a lot of these receivers. I do watch the Big 12 because I did go to Baylor. I'm a Baylor fan. And so I've seen a lot of Quentin Johnston's tape. So I feel specifically the strongest about my take on him. But overall, I mean, the size, the weight, the speed, that is like the ideal X receiver on the outside, nightmare matchup kind of a player that every team's going to want. I think that's probably going to lock him into being the first or second receiver taken, just because a lot of teams get really attracted to that kind of size and speed combo. But I also think that he's a really strong pass catcher, really explosive pass catcher. Like I said, I do think that he's agile for his size. Once again, not Zay Flowers, but for somebody who's 6'4", 215, I think that he can move. I think that he does have areas to work with. He does have questions on how consistently he can create separation with a different route tree. And also there were some occasional times that he, when going up for the ball in the air, wouldn't use his size as much as he could have. Like, he would try to catch it with his chest as opposed to like extending his arms. But I think that's a fixable issue. But that's just, a nitpicky level thing here. But I think the biggest thing, once again, is going to be the route tree there. But I think that, like, compared to like Drake London, for example, last year, I think that he's more agile, has more fluid movement, and he's got a better route tree. So anyway, Quentin Johnston, he is my number one receiver in the class, and that's a wrap.
Yeah, and just once again, just to add, in case you for some reason missed the earlier part, I want to preface that John's been more on the money, especially wide receiver wise, the past 2 years. So, like I said, I could easily see Quentin Johnston being the first one. Remember, we both had Drake London outside of our top 5 last year. He was the first receiver. And once again, even if you're taking first, second, third, end of the day, it doesn't really matter until you get on the field. So,
also, to be fair, our top 3s are all the same. So, I mean, it's just different order, but it's the same guys. So it's like 1 and 3. It's really not that big a difference. I think we agree he's a first round pick, right?
Yeah, but 1, 2, top 3 guys, I definitely have locking as first round, going in the first round.